I moved to this quiet suburb for the sole purpose of finally getting a break from the hustle and bustle of the big city. After 10 years of working in a stuffy metropolitan office, I decided it was time for a change of scenery. Remote work allowed me to work from anywhere, so I chose a cozy house on the outskirts of a small town. The house was small but well maintained, just what I needed. A wooden porch with a swing, a small garden and thick greenery all around made it feel cozy. Everything was perfect, and I felt like I had finally found a place where I could just live and work at my own pace. The first thing I decided to do was to get to know my neighbors. Across the street lived a man in his mid-40s, stout and a little gloomy. He was neatly trimming the hedges outside his house. I waved at him and crossed the road. "Hi. I'm Anthony. I've recently moved into the house across the street." The man looked up and froze for a moment, as if assessing me. Then he nodded. "Paul. The cop. Wow, cool. I'm a programmer who works remotely. Nice to meet you." Paul wiped his hands on an old towel and suddenly looked me in the eye with a serious look. "Look, Anthony, this place is quiet. There's usually no trouble. But here's the thing, don't go outside after sundown. Just, don't do it." I raised my eyebrows in surprise. "Is that a joke?" Paul didn't smile. "It's not a joke. Just, don't go out. You'll be fine." He turned away and continued trimming the hedge as if the conversation was over. I remained standing still, trying to figure out what that was all about. Seriously? Not going outside after sundown? Is this some kind of local ritual? Or did the guy have a problem with his head? When I got back to the house, I still felt strangely uneasy. The whole thing seemed absurd. I glanced out the window again and noticed that Paul, having finished with the bushes, was fixing additional locks on the door. Not just one, but a string of them, as if preparing for a siege. I shook my head, trying to put the nonsense out of my head. I'd moved to a quiet suburb, and here was this paranoid neighbor. Settling down on the couch with my laptop, I decided to get my work tasks sorted out. But no matter how much I tried to focus, the same thing kept running through my head: don't go out after sundown. It sounded like a warning from a horror movie. When evening came, I went to the window. It was quiet outside. The sun was slowly sinking below the horizon, coloring the sky orange and pink. A knock sounded behind me, and I almost jumped. When I turned around, I saw that it was just a branch scraping against the glass. "What a scarecrow," I muttered to myself. I pulled the blinds open and looked up at Paul's house. There was no light in the windows, but in the faint glow of the flashlight I could see that his front door was now shining with the gleam of several padlocks. Well, it looked like the neighbor had seriously prepared for the night. About 10 o'clock I was about to go to bed when I heard a low rustle at the window. My heart beat faster, and I forced myself to go over and peek in. No one was there. Only the trees swayed slightly in the wind. Checking the door, I found that the lock was securely closed. The feeling of unease wouldn't let go. I decided to check the security cameras I had installed during the day. I rewound the footage, nothing suspicious. Probably just the wind. I was about to calm down when I heard a creaking sound. It was coming from the backyard. I went to the window again, gently pulled the curtains open, and froze. There was a shadow standing on the lawn. Tall, elongated, like a man with unnaturally long limbs. I blinked, and the shadow was gone. Damn, maybe I'm just tired, I thought. But before I went to bed, I put an extra lock on the door. Lying in bed, I tried to reassure myself. Maybe Paul really does have a reason to be so careful. Or maybe it was just his own personal paranoia. I decided to forget about it and go back to sleep, but before I turned out the light, my gaze fell on the window again. There, in the faint moonlight, I noticed a subtle movement. I froze. A shadow flashed by my porch for a second. A man? A beast? Or was I imagining things? Just in case, I closed the curtains and turned on the nightlight. I wasn't going to sleep with the lights off tonight. But it wasn't even that scared me the most. It was the thought that Paul had known about these visitors beforehand. The next morning I woke up with a heavy head. My sleep was restless, in my half-sleep I kept thinking that someone was walking around the house, scratching at the walls and whispering softly. But when I woke up and looked out the window, the yard was empty. I tried to convince myself that it was just the effects of moving and fatigue. It happens when the mind throws up creepy images in the face of stress. After my morning coffee, I decided to check the car. And that's when my doubts began to turn into certainties. I saw long scratches on the hood and front doors, as if someone had run a sharp object over them. I walked around the car, checked all the windows, no sign of forced entry. But these scratches. They looked like long fingerprints. I ran my hand over one of the stripes, the paint was peeled off, as if someone had squeezed the metal with force. Paul came out of the house just as I was examining the car. He walked over quickly and frowned. "Did you go out at night?" "No. I was home all the time. But someone clearly decided to scratch my car." I pointed to the marks. Paul stared at the scratches for a long time, then muttered quietly. "They started it." "Who?" I asked him again. He looked at me and said quietly. "Never mind. It happens. If you don't open the door, they won't come in." "What?" I still couldn't understand what he was saying. "Just be careful. Don't go out. And don't look. They like to be looked at." With that, Paul turned and went home. I stood there, trying to make sense of what I'd heard. This was starting to get tense. Who were they? Why can't you look? Why can't you go out? In the evening, I decided to distract myself and ordered a pizza. While I was waiting for delivery, I heard a rustling outside the window. I walked over and carefully opened the curtain. There was no one outside. Only a streetlight that was blinking strangely, as if trying to communicate something in Morse code. A minute later, a delivery car pulled up. I opened the door and saw a guy standing with a box, clearly nervous. "Sorry I'm late," he mumbled. It's kind of creepy at night." "Yeah, I noticed," I nodded. "What's the problem?" "I don't know. It's kind of creepy. Especially after the sun goes down." I took the pizza and closed the door. I sat down on the couch, but I couldn't eat. It was all starting to get on my nerves. Later that evening, the doorbell rang. I went to the peephole and looked in. It was Cheryl, the neighbor from the house on the corner. I opened the door. "Hi," she said. "Are you okay? I saw Paul saying something to you this morning." "Yeah, I'm fine, just a little, tense. Found some scratches on the car this morning." She frowned. "Scratches? On the car? You didn't go out last night?" "No. But I thought I saw someone walking around the house." Cheryl sighed. "Look, I work the night shift, I often come back after dark. Sometimes I think someone is following me. Paul says I'm just screwing with my head, but I had scratches on my door, too. Maybe it's just teenagers messing around." I suggested, even though I didn't really believe it myself. "Maybe. But did you hear something scraping on the windows?" "Yeah. And not just scratching. Sometimes I hear whispering. Like someone's trying to say something through the glass." Cheryl's pale. "Don't look in windows at night. And don't open doors. Even if it sounds like someone is calling." I looked at her puzzled. "Calling?" She nodded. "One day I thought my brother was knocking on the door. I went to the window, and there was a person outside. But, his face was blurry. As if through a cloudy glass. I got scared and closed the curtains. I suddenly remembered the shadow of the previous night. Perhaps I had seen the same thing. All night I hardly slept at all. Lying on my bed, I listened to every sound. The house seemed to have a life of its own. At 4 o'clock in the morning, I heard the grinding again, this time from the back porch. I gathered my courage and turned on the cameras on my phone. I opened the feed and there was nothing. Just a faint light by the porch. Suddenly there was a quiet knock on the window. I looked at the camera again, still no one. But when I dared to look out, I noticed a long mark on the glass, as if someone had run his palm across it. At that moment I was really scared. I closed all the curtains and checked the locks. Anxious thoughts came into my head. I sat down on the couch and picked up my phone. Texted Paul. You were right. They were at the house. The reply came instantly. Don't look. Don't open it. Don't listen. Almost immediately afterward, the power went out in the house. I stood in complete darkness, hearing someone walking outside the window. And then I realized that the moment I looked out the window, they had seen me. I sat down on the floor, wrapped my arms around my head and tried to calm down. But in the silence of the house, I distinctly heard someone whispering my name at the very window. N2N. Let us go. It had been a few days since the night I'd first heard the whispering outside my window. I tried to convince myself that it was just a figment of my imagination, that I was tired from the move and nervous. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was real. Paul never came to see me, but I knew he was watching the house from the window across the street. Sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of his silhouette behind the curtain. He was on the lookout. I decided not to look out the windows at night anymore. But the disturbing thoughts kept me awake. I began to notice that even during the day I felt uncomfortable, as if someone was watching me. In the evening I sat in the kitchen and tried to distract myself with work. At the same time I started the surveillance camera on my laptop. It was quiet outside, no rustling or movement. I was almost relaxed when suddenly I heard a sharp sound outside, as if someone had fallen onto the porch with a thud. I jumped up and rushed to the door, but remembered Paul's words, "Don't open it." My heart was pounding, and I forced myself back into the kitchen. But then I heard a woman scream. Someone was obviously calling for help. I went to the door again, pressed my ear against the jamb, and listened. Someone was crying outside. I carefully peered through the peephole. Cheryl was standing on the porch, bent in half as if in pain. She was sobbing and holding her stomach. "Cheryl?" I called out. She looked up sharply, and I noticed that her face was somehow strange. It seemed to move jerkily, distorting as if on a poorly adjusted screen. "Anthony, help," she wheezed, her voice harsh and alien. I drew back. She continued to stand on the porch, unmoving. Suddenly there was a knock on the door, a slow, monotonous knock, as if someone were tapping their fingers on wood. My heart sank into my heels. I checked the camera, there was no one on the porch. But the knocking continued. I looked through the peephole again. Cheryl was still standing there, but now her head was tilted at an unnatural angle. She opened her mouth, and I heard a whisper. "Let us go." I backed up and suddenly heard my phone ring. It was Paul. I grabbed the phone sharply. "Anthony, whatever you do, don't open the door. It's not her." But I saw her. I yelled back. "No." Paul shouted. "It's not Cheryl. They know who you're going to let in." Suddenly the banging stopped. I looked through the peephole and there was no one on the porch. My whole body was covered in cold sweat. I felt like I was going crazy. A few minutes later, a text came in from Cheryl. "Are you okay? I'm still at work. I have a long evening." I stared at the screen, feeling a chill creep up my spine. If Cheryl is at work, then who was on my porch? My head buzzed with questions and fear. I dialed her number. "Cheryl, is that you? Where are you right now?" "I'm at work," she answered calmly. "What's wrong? Are you sure you didn't come to see me?" "Anthony, I'm on the other side of town." "What's going on?" I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't find the words. All I could say was, "It's okay. Just make sure you don't walk home alone." I hung up the phone and stared at the door. My insides clenched with fear. If it wasn't Cheryl, who was it? An hour later, I heard footsteps under the window again. This time I didn't check the cameras, I just lurked and listened. The footsteps were quiet but distinct. They circled the house slowly, as if someone was scratching the walls on purpose to get my attention. Then there was a whisper. "Let us go, we know you're watching." I covered my ears with my hands, trying not to listen, but the whisper continued to penetrate my consciousness. I knew that if I gave in and opened the door, it would be the end. The next day I went to see Paul. He was pale and looked exhausted. I told him about last night, but he just nodded. They realized you knew. Now every night they'll be checking to see if you'll give in. But who are they? I shouted in desperation. Paul looked me straight in the eye. I don't fully know myself. But if you let them in once, they'll stay. They'll come again and again until you're the same. The same? I don't understand. Like Mr. Kent. He let them in a couple years ago. Now they can't leave. Kent became, one of them. Why don't you leave here? Paul sighed heavily. Someone has to hold them back. If I leave, they'll break out into the city. It's like a plague. It's enough to make it go away. I got really scared. I realized I was part of something ancient and dangerous, and now there was no turning back. Before I left, Paul grabbed my hand and said quietly. If you hear the voice of someone you know at the door again, don't answer it. Don't look out the window. Just stand there and wait. They must think you've left. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could take the pressure. The only thing I could think of was, how could I have made such a mistake in choosing this house? After the conversation with Paul, I could no longer feel safe. His words kept running through my mind, if they know your name and voice, they are close. I didn't know what to do, but I knew that night was coming and the nightmare would begin again. I decided not to sit in the dark. I turned on the lights in all the rooms, checked the locks, locked all the windows. Paul suggested lighting candles by the door and on the windowsills, but I found only old lanterns and put them in the hallway. When it got dark outside the window, I sat on the couch with a mug of strong coffee and opened my laptop, just to distract myself. The newsfeed seemed absurd, someone was complaining about traffic jams, someone about price increases, and I sat shivering and waiting for something to appear at my window. 1 o'clock in the morning. Silence. I was beginning to think that maybe it was all gone, when suddenly I heard a rustle by the porch. I froze. The sound was repeated, like someone was slowly running their fingers along the wooden steps. I forced myself to breathe slowly and quietly, but my heart was racing. Knock, knock, knock. Muffled thumps on the door. I clutched my mug, trying not to make any noise. To an eye, the voice sounded muffled, as if speaking from a deep hole. I recognized that voice. My own. A cold shiver ran through me. I clenched my fists, repeating to myself, don't answer. Don't look. But the voice didn't stop. It grew louder and louder, calling to me, urging me on. To an eye. Open up. We want to talk. You're alone, aren't you? We know. At some point, I couldn't stand it and looked into the camera on my phone. The screen flashed, showed static, but for a few seconds I saw something. A tall shadow, like a man with outstretched limbs, stood in front of the door. The face was unnaturally long, distorted, without eyes or mouth. The shadow seemed to change shape all the time, like a shivering film. I recoiled and closed my laptop, as if that would help. The sound outside the door grew louder, not just a thumping, but a scraping, as if someone were scratching at the door with long claws. I no longer knew where was reality and where was madness. Suddenly, a flashlight beam peeked through the window. I jumped up, but saw it was Paul. He was standing by the porch and had his gun at the ready. I almost ran out to him, but remembered his warning, don't open it after sundown. Paul raised his hand as if to warn me to stay inside, then pointed the flashlight at something in the darkness. I heard his voice. Get lost. You're not wanted here. Something rustled in the bushes, and I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. The tall shadow disappeared, as if it had vanished into thin air. Paul stood still for a few seconds, then lowered the lantern and looked at my window. Is everything all right? He shouted. I nodded silently, not knowing whether to be glad or even more afraid. Paul walked back to his room. I knew he would stay on guard, but I felt like he couldn't protect me forever. I tried to calm down and turned on my laptop again. Checked the footage from the camera. In the video, I saw the shadow by the door again, but now it was closer to the camera, like it was trying to look inside. The face was blank. Only ink blots instead of eyes. Suddenly there was a new sound, like someone scrabbling around outside under another window. I couldn't bring myself to look, but the camera turned itself on. A shadow flashed on the screen again, but now it was standing at the bedroom window. She seemed to be looking inside, trying to get a glimpse of me. A message appeared on the phone screen. From Paul. Don't make eye contact. Don't open the curtains. They shouldn't realize you can see them. I realized I was standing in the middle of the room with the phone in my hand and my whole body shaking. I decided to go deeper into the house, away from the windows, but I heard the whispering again. Ento and I, can you see us? Can you hear us? I clutched my eyes tightly and sat down on the hallway floor with my knees pressed to my chest. The whispering didn't stop. The voice grew quieter and quieter, as if distant, but I could hear the words. You are alone. Alone. You can see us. I sat like that until morning. It was only at dawn that everything quieted down. I got up with difficulty and looked out the window. I could see footprints on the asphalt in front of the house, long footprints, as if someone had dragged something heavy across the ground. Paul came in the next morning. He looked like a man who'd been up all night. Did they see you? He asked in a hoarse voice. Yes. They called my name. I heard my voice. Paul closed his eyes as if praying. That's not good. If they know your voice, they'll come back. They won't leave. Why do you live here? Why won't you leave? Paul looked at me bitterly. Because if I leave, they'll move on. To other people. I knew what I was getting into when I decided to stay. I realized that Paul had taken on the role of watchman. He was keeping the shadows in this area so they wouldn't go into town. I looked at him with horror and respect at the same time. I'm leaving, Paul. Tonight. He nodded. I'd do the same. But if you stay, they won't let you go. I started to pack, but I kept thinking, if I left, those entities would go to Paul. And if he gave up, they'd go to town. As I walked outside with my suitcase, I saw Paul standing on the porch of his house, watching me. I knew he would fight, but I didn't know how long he would last. I took one last look at the house and left, knowing that Paul would be left alone with the shadows of the night. Paul goes back into the house with Anthony, closes the door tightly and pulls down all the blinds. He looks tired and wary, like he's constantly on edge. Anthony tries to pull himself together, but panic still seeps into his voice. Paul, what are those things? Why are they here? He whispers, afraid to raise his voice. Paul looks at him sidelong. I tried to warn you, but you wouldn't listen. Now they know you saw them. They'll find every opportunity to break into the house. You shouldn't have opened the door at night. His voice is almost a croak. Anthony shakes his head, not believing what's happening. But who are they? Why are they following us? Paul hesitates, as if he doesn't want to reveal the truth, but then he speaks. 20 years ago, this was a peaceful place. A small suburb where everyone knew each other. But then people started disappearing. First children. Then adults. Nobody knew what was going on until one day they found the old pastor dead on the church porch. On his chest was carved the inscription, "They're back." Anthony stares at it, trying to understand. Who's back? I'd like to know myself, Paul replies. They came in one night. No one noticed at first. Just strange noises, scratches on the doors, laughter under the windows. And then the disappearances. People disappeared, but not all at once. It was like someone was picking them out. And every time someone disappeared, there was a sign on the house that said, "He saw us." Anthony recalls Paul's words the first night, "Now they know you saw them. So they come after those who have spotted them." He squeezes out. Yes, Paul nods briefly. You can't see them. And you can't open the door for them. But worst of all, you can't call out to them. If they hear their name, it's over. Anthony suddenly realizes, his name has already been heard outside several times. They called my name. And also, yours. Paul freezes. What? They said, "It's Paul." Paul backs slowly to the window, pulls back a corner of the curtain, and looks out. This is impossible. I live here alone. What do you mean? Anthony asks. I'm here because they've already taken my family, Paul replies deftly. I stayed so they wouldn't go to the city. It's my duty. If I leave, they will follow me. At that moment, someone knocks sharply on the door. Quietly at first, then harder. Anthony freezes. Paul quickly gestures for him to be silent. Anthony, open up. It's me, Paul, it sounds from outside. Anthony is shocked. He looks back at Paul beside him. What the hell, he whispers. Don't listen, Paul says coldly. They're imitating voices to deceive. Anthony, open up, it's me. Hurry. You're in danger. Comes the voice again. Paul walks slowly to the door and looks through the peephole. His face is pale. It's me, he breathes out. What do you mean, you? Anthony tries to push him away from the door, but Paul holds him back. They can't change people's appearance, Paul says. Only voices. It can't be me. But then the voice outside changes. Anthony, it's Cheryl. Are you there? Are you okay? The woman asks. Anthony is shaking. This is impossible. Paul slowly sits down on the floor, as if realizing something terrible. Never left. I've been here for 10 years. And every night they come to see me. But that night, when I came back from my shift, I don't remember coming in. I don't remember anything. Anthony freezes. You mean? Paul looks at him with a blank stare. Maybe. I'm already dead. Anthony steps back, unsure of what's true and what's not. The knocking on the door stops. There is silence in the house. The next morning, Anthony wakes up on the floor, next to Paul. Paul is silent, as if he fell asleep with his eyes open. Anthony slowly gets up and walks to the window. It is quiet outside. He opens the door, steps out onto the porch and notices something strange. There are barefoot footprints imprinted in the grass leading to his door. On the wall of the house is a new chalk inscription. Too late. He's already in the house. Anthony slowly turns around. Paul is standing on the threshold, looking at him with blank eyes. I told you not to go out at night, he says. Anthony tries to close the door, but Paul suddenly blocks his path. You've become one of them, Anthony whispers. Paul doesn't move, his gaze blank and detached. Anthony realizes that he is no longer human. Sometimes evil doesn't come from the darkness. It's just waiting to come in.